Hello, everybody, and welcome to our third of four Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month webinars. Today, we are going to be talking about pulling the weeds in your relationships. So my name is Olivia, and if you haven't seen a webinar with me before, you don't know me. I am the South County Prevention Coordinator with Domestic Violence Services of Snohomish County. I'm really happy to be here today talking to you all, and I really appreciate all of your flexibility and patience with us. We've had a little bit of a crazy month in the Prevention Education and Outreach Department here at DVS. And so we are coming to you not live, but pre-recorded, as you can tell if you are here watching this. I am here today also filling in for my lovely colleague and friend, Liz. She's out today and unable to record. And so I am going to be doing my very best to fill her shoes today. She put together and imagined this awesome presentation. So it should be a really good day. Again, if this is your first time joining us, your kind of first time perusing the YouTube channel, welcome again. Hopefully you'll check out some of the other videos that we have up as well. And I do want to welcome you again to February, which is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. As I mentioned, we're doing 4 webinars this month under the theme, Let Love Grow. And so our first of these 3 webinars was that's this one, planting the seeds of healthy relationships. The second was growing these healthy relationships. And today we're going to be talking about pulling the weeds and what that can kind of look like. So throughout this presentation, of course, usually if this were live, I would say put questions in the chat, feel free to engage. Of course, now with this pre-recorded webinar, please feel free to still write down questions and then reach out to us after or during the webinar. If you have questions or concerns that you'd like answered, we'd still love to engage with you. So again, thanks so much for being here and welcome. As for our agenda today, we are going to be sticking pretty strictly to this weeds metaphor today. Again, it's a really great presentation. So we're going to be talking about what are weeds when we're talking about healthy relationships or unhealthy relationships for that matter. What are we talking about when we say weeds? How do we identify them? And then what does pulling those weeds kind of look like? So when we're thinking about weeds, right, just in general, in the garden context, right? Weeds are primarily invasive species. They typically grow in environments that they're not native to, right? They utilize all the resources. They create an environment in which other plants are unable to grow and thrive. So if you're thinking back to our first 2 webinars, which again, hopefully you've seen or will check out after this, if you're thinking about those other webinars, right, we want to be thinking about those healthy relationships as those things we want to be growing, fostering, watering, giving sunlight, all of that stuff. So these weeds are making an inhospitable environment for those other plants, those healthy relationships to grow and thrive. However, just like any other plant, weeds start out as small sprouts, right? Barely noticeable. The longer they're left unnoticed, the more energy they take and the bigger they grow. Those of you who actually are into literal gardening probably know this really well, right? Completely unchecked, weeds can take over an entire plot of land. So you might be thinking, okay, but what does this have to do with domestic violence? Don't worry, we're getting there. So again, our theme for Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month this year is Let Love Grow. And to keep with this metaphor, we're going to think of the weeds in our garden of love as red flags. So red flags, if you haven't heard that term before, are basically just signs that a relationship is unhealthy, right? So hopefully, maybe you're thinking of some red flags that you have personally with stuff. You might have your own personal boundaries. That's totally reasonable, totally fair. There might be some things that are coming to mind for you right away. Here's a list of some red flags that we typically use when we're talking about abusive and unhealthy relationships. So I'm going to go over each of these just pretty briefly. Again, if you have any more questions or would like to learn more, please send us an email. I'll send that contact information out at the end. So looking at these red flags, we have intensity. If a relationship has a lot of intensity, we're thinking about this in terms of a red flag. That basically means that one partner is doing really grand gestures or making really extreme statements that make the other partner feel overwhelmed or uncomfortable or stressed out, right? It might be showing up at your house with a gift that you didn't ask for and you didn't actually tell them your address, so you're not sure how they found out where you live. It might be saying really intense statements like, you're the only person I'll ever love. right? You're the only thing that makes me happy in this world. And those things can certainly look flattering. And if both people explicitly communicate and agree that they both like those kinds of statements and expressions, that's one thing. But it's another thing when it's one-sided, when one person is putting those gestures, putting those statements onto the other person and creating a really intense environment. The next one we have going straight down the list is possessiveness. So this is basically when one partner tries to control what the other person does, how they act, right? Where they go, who they talk to, any number of things that create this dynamic where one person has ownership over the other. One of the biggest things we say about healthy relationships is that they should be equal. There should absolutely not be a dynamic of one person having ownership or control over the other person. Unfortunately, with possessiveness, this is what we see, right? This is things like, I don't think you should talk to that person. I don't think you should wear that. Are you sure you're going to eat that? All these different kinds of things that try to lock this person into this little bubble. And that's not a sign that you really care about someone, right? Even if it can be disguised like with statements like, I just really, really care about you. I love you so much. And that's why I don't want you going out tonight. Or that's why I don't want you doing that thing or hanging out with that person. If we really care about someone, we should be encouraging them to pursue those things, to do what they want to do things that are going to make them happy, not trying to control them or cut them off from those things. The next one we have is guilting. So these are statements or actions from one partner that try to make the other partner feel entirely responsible for the first partner's emotions and their actions, right? As partners, as human beings, we all have a responsibility to treat each other with kindness and respect. But we do not have a responsibility for our partner's emotions. We don't have responsibility for anyone else's actions or emotions except our own. And even if you're in a relationship, even if it's a very serious relationship and it's, it's far along, right? You have strong feelings for each other. That doesn't mean that you're ever responsible for your partner's emotions or their actions and vice versa. So saying things to someone like, well, I guess we don't have to hang out tonight, but if we don't, I'm just never going to be happy again. Right? That's a really, again, going back to that intensity thing, that's a really intense statement that makes someone feel really bad. It makes someone feel guilty, responsible. And that's not how we want to be feeling in relationships. The next one is belittling. That one's decently straightforward. So that's when we're talking about putting someone down, insulting them. And that can be on any number of things, right? Their appearance, their intellect, their choices. That's not something we want to be doing in a relationship. Dishonesty, so telling lies, obscuring the truth in order to try to get your way or manipulate the situation. That's never okay in a relationship. And another thing about dishonesty that we always like to make sure that we say is that it's equally important that both people in a relationship feel that they have the space to be honest. So it is equally as much of a red flag if someone tells a lie as if they create a space where the other person does not feel safe saying how they truly feel. If one partner is scared to tell the truth, scared to admit to a mistake that they made or own up to something because they fear that their partner will physically retaliate against them, emotionally harm them, anything like that, that is an unsafe environment, and that is also a red flag. Looking over at the right side here, the next one we have is deflecting responsibility. So deflecting responsibility is essentially just continually avoiding accountability for your own abusive or unhealthy behaviors, right? If there's always an excuse, if there's always a reason, well, this person made me mad, right? You made me so mad, that's why I had to do this to you. Again, we are all accountable for our own actions, both the good and the bad, right? The positive and the harmful. We have to take ownership of those things. And if someone is continually making excuses like, well, I was drunk, or, I was having a really bad day, and so I deserve to treat you like this, right? These kinds of things don't cause abuse. Alcoholism, past trauma, anger management problems, these are all things that can exist alongside abusive behaviors. They can definitely complicate and exacerbate the situation, but those things do not cause abuse. There are plenty of people who can have a drink, can have a fun time with alcohol, drugs, whatever that might be, and choose not to abuse their partners. There are plenty of people who even struggle with addiction who still choose not to abuse their partners. The next one is volatility. This is basically big highs and big lows, really unpredictable ups and downs that make the relationship feel tumultuous, high drama, stressful, and uncertain. If you're feeling like you never really know what to expect from your partner, if maybe they react completely neutrally and almost unfeelingly to you one day, and then the next day they completely blow up at you over something small, that's a really volatile environment, and that's not healthy. The next one we have is manipulation. This is a really broad one. A lot of these can fall under the umbrella of manipulation. What this essentially means is trying to control the way that someone feels, the way that they think, and ultimately what they do, right? So guilting can absolutely be a form of manipulation, trying to get someone to feel bad and then change their actions, right? Telling someone, well, I don't want you to, if you really loved me, you wouldn't go hang out with this person because I'm the one who truly cares about you. That's also manipulative. Isolation. A lot of times people hear this word and they might think of physical isolation, and that can absolutely be a truth in abusive relationships. It's a very, very scary thing that can happen. Someone might physically not be allowed or safe to leave their house unless their partner says it's okay. And of course, that is never okay. That is a very unsafe situation. Isolation can also look a little bit more subtle than that. What this essentially means is shrinking down someone's social circle. And so if one partner is continually saying to the other partner, I don't think you should hang out with your friends anymore. I don't think you're spending enough time with me. I don't really trust your family, right? Even if the survivor, the other partner might be like, well, I like my family or I like my friends. They've always been there for me, right? If that other partner is continually saying things to try to break down the other person's trust in their other support systems, that's a sign of isolation as well. Because what's going to happen over time is if the survivor, if the other partner feels pressured or guilty or afraid, and they continually choose their partner over their friends, over their family, over their other obligations, probably what's going to happen is a lot of those relationships are going to fray a little bit. They're going to fall by the wayside. They're not going to be as strong. And then what's going to happen is eventually that survivor might look around one day and realize it's just me and this abuser now, right? In this little tunnel. It's just the two of us. I don't have any outside perspectives. I don't have anyone I can turn to because I haven't talked to my friends in 6 months, right? Isolation is a very, very scary phenomenon that can happen. And then the last one we have here is sabotage. So this could be anything from spreading rumors about somebody, right? Spreading nasty things about them. It could also be, trying to take someone away from their commitments. So saying things like, you shouldn't go to your big work event tonight, right? I don't think you should study for your test. All these things that then thereby sabotage their success in other areas, right? Damage their reputation. And again, as partners, we want to be lifting our partners up. We want to be empowering them, certainly not undermining their reputation or their success. All right. So it may not always be super obvious when there are weeds or red flags in your relationship. And you might not be able to name exactly what's wrong. That definitely can happen sometimes, right? So here are some other red flags that we typically like to think of as internal red flags. Not exactly sure what the weed metaphor would be for that. But these are some signs that there are weeds growing in your relationship's garden. Maybe they're not quite as explicit as some of those other ones I just went over, but they are absolutely related and just as serious. So if you feel exhausted in your relationship, if you just feel tired, maybe after interacting with your partner, you feel like you need a rest, you feel like you need to just like chill for a while because you are overwhelmed, you're stressed out, you're angry, you're sad, you don't know what's going on. If that is the pattern of interacting with your partner, that might be a red flag, right? It might mean that some of those other things are going on. If you feel ashamed, this can look a couple ways. If you feel ashamed of yourself, ashamed to be who you are, that could be a sign that they are belittling you, right? Another way this can look is if you feel ashamed to talk about your relationship with other people. If you feel ashamed of how your partner is acting, if you feel like you need to justify or explain your partner's actions to your friends, to your family, to people in public, that might mean that they're acting in a way that needs to be kind of talked about, that needs to be changed, right? If you feel like you're walking on eggshells, that's that volatility piece. So you're kind of tiptoeing around your partner. You're not really sure what's going to set them off in a certain moment on a given day, right? If they've had a good day, maybe they'll be nice to you, but if they've had a really bad day, they might scream at you. And so the best and safest thing to do for you over time is just to mute your own personality, right? To be quiet, to be submissive, and to just try to not say anything to rock the boat. And again, that is not your responsibility. Speaking of responsibility, if you feel overly responsible for your partner's actions, for your partner's emotions, again, we should all feel a certain sense of responsibility in our relationships. We all have responsibility to act like decent human beings. But if you feel like it all comes down to what you do, whether your partner is going to mistreat you or not, that is a red flag. If you feel trapped, if you feel like you literally physically cannot leave the relationship, something bad will happen to you, something bad will happen to someone that you care about. If you feel like if you leave, maybe your entire social circle will fall apart, maybe you'll have financial troubles if you leave, that's a red flag as well. If you feel alone, if you feel like, again, there's not really anyone that you can go to, you're not really sure who you can ask or talk to about this, you kind of just feel like your partner, even though they're the one hurting you, is the only one that you have, that might be a sign of that isolation piece I just talked about. If you feel confused, so maybe after interacting with your partner, you kind of come away from those conversations like, what just happened? Like, I thought I went into this with conviction. I thought I went into this with my own opinion and with an idea of what's going on. And now I just feel scrambled and confused and, maybe even a little bit manipulated if you're able to get there in your head. That might mean that they're manipulating you, right? They might be questioning your reality. They might be minimizing you, invalidating you, judging you. And those are not things we want our partners to be doing. And then lastly, of course, if you feel afraid, fear has no place in your relationships. None. So there's no reason that your partner should be making you fear them. Again, you shouldn't be fearing for your physical safety, for your emotional safety, for your sexual safety, for your psychological safety, any of that. That should not be a reason that you stay in a relationship or that you have to stay in a relationship. Cool. So we're going to transition a little bit now to talking about the life cycle of weeds. Just like weeds, red flags are invasive in a relationship. They can start small as just a little seed, right? Just that one instance that isn't even that noticeable. Maybe you brush it off. And then maybe they can sprout. Maybe you see it, but you're not quite sure if it's a flower or if it's a weed, right? This can totally happen. This can be things like big grand gestures, right? Your new partner shows up to your house with flowers and you're thinking, wow, this is so sweet. But also, how do you know where I live, right? That thing I talked about earlier. And then it starts to grow and it might show its nature as, in fact, a weed. You see its leaves potentially, maybe even a bud, and maybe that behavior that bothers you or feels wrong. By the time it blooms, you know that there's something off or something that you don't like happening. Unchecked, again, eventually this can seed and spread to other areas where the cycle begins anew and more weeds can appear in that relationship. So how can we identify the weeds in our relationship? The reality is that everyone will likely engage in red flag behaviors at some point in our lives, especially in relationships when we are younger. Again, this is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, so we do want to bring it back to that, right? We might see something on TV in a family member or friend's relationship and mimic that in our own relationship. That seed's planted and it finds a place in your own relationships. You may have eventually realized that that was an unhealthy behavior. Maybe you've worked on it. Maybe you've had a partner call you out on it and you've worked through it together. That can absolutely happen. And there may be behaviors that have taken root in your relationships that have not been worked on. That's also a possibility. It's important to know that that's okay, right? These things can happen. So what are weeds to some are not necessarily weeds to others. This is another really important one. Some red flags are definitely deal breakers, but others might not be. What's a red flag to one person may not be one to another person. What's a deal breaker to one person may not be one to another person. Again, weeds are not weeds everywhere. They're invasive species. They come from somewhere else to an environment that they are not native to and overwhelm the ecosystem. But in their native environment, their role may be less detrimental, right? Maybe it's not as big of a deal. We all have different preferences in our relationships, what feels good to us, what doesn't feel good to us. This is determined by a number of factors. Two of these big factors are our love languages and our attachment styles. So knowing your love language can help you identify what you consider to be a weed in your relationship and what you don't. Physical touch. This may be behaviors like wanting to be hugged or holding your partner's hand or any kind of sexual intimacy, right? Quality time. This looks like wanting to spend time with your partner, whether that's doing something either both of you love doing, hanging out with your friends or family, or just simply sharing a space together. Maybe you don't even have to be talking or doing anything. Acts of service. This is decently self-explanatory. This looks like doing things for someone, helping out with homework, doing dishes for them, driving them to an appointment, all that kind of stuff. Gifts, that can be buying your partner something that makes you think of them, liking to receive little treats from them regularly, maybe making something for them, all of that kind of stuff. Words of affirmation. This is hearing verbal expressions of support and affection, or preferring to offer them to someone that you care about. So we all have preferences of how we like to receive love and express love and how we don't, right? For some, physical touch may be a hard, not interested, but for others, it may be one of their top ways to experience affection. Our love languages are not static. Also, they may be different throughout our lifetime and in different relationships or friendships. One other aspect of our personality that determines our relationship preferences and what's a weed in our relationships is our attachment style. So similar to our love languages, they can change across our lifetime and differ in varying relationships. Attachment styles, if you haven't heard of them, are essentially just our psychological mindsets in relationships. There are 4 different general types of attachment styles, and they're characterized by a number of different behaviors. The style that we have is influenced by our experiences growing up and the relationships that we have throughout our life. A secure attachment style is characterized by the ability to trust and be trusted, to love and receive love, to develop closeness fairly easily, being unafraid of physical and emotional intimacy, depending on others without becoming dependent, and not feeling panic when partners need time or space away. An anxious attachment style is characterized by a deep fear of abandonment, which usually results in seeking validation frequently, neediness, and other quote unquote clingy behaviors. You might hear that term sometimes. An avoidant attachment style is characterized by a fear of intimacy, as people who might have this attachment style don't believe that their needs can get met through a relationship. This often exhibits itself through a lack of trust, being emotionally unavailable, preferring to be by themselves, and trouble getting close to their partner. The final attachment style is anxious avoidant. So as per its name, this is a combination of both the anxious and avoidant attachment styles. An individual with this attachment style desperately craves affection, but also wants to avoid it at all costs. They may be reluctant to develop close relationships, but they still need to feel loved by other people. Each of these styles determines how we like to receive and express love. Our attachment style plays a significant role in what we consider red flags, weeds, right? And what we don't. People who have an anxious attachment style may need more validation and reassurance and offer those things to their partner, whereas someone with an avoidant attachment style may prefer to have space away from their partner. So this is a list of a number of different behaviors. Each could be a red flag or a green flag, right? So basically like a good positive sign for someone. So basically a weed or a flower, right? These are ways in which our top love languages and our attachment styles influence how we like to receive and express love. So as we go through each of these, I guess I was going to say reply in the chat, but on autopilot here, you can just be thinking to yourself, right? Maybe write it down, talk to a friend, do whatever you want to do with it. Just be thinking about whether this is a red or a green flag for you. So let's go through each of these now. If your partner says, "I love you" with each goodbye. If they avoid public displays of affection. If they pay for every date with you. If they respond to texts only after they're done with work or school. If they make plans to hang out with you every single day. If they wash your car for you without your request. They get you presents for your monthly anniversaries. If they only want to hang out on weekends. If they hold your hand whenever you're standing close to them, right? Probably with these, and hopefully you all are kind of thinking through these, maybe writing down your answers, maybe talking about them. You can kind of see how some of these might be like really sweet and exciting and wanted for some people, and really like not it for other people, right? Someone might really, really appreciate if their partner says, "I love you" after they get off the phone with them every time. They might feel very validated, cared for, all that good stuff. Another person might be like, "Okay, cool, thank you, I love you too, but like I don't need to hear that every single time. That's kind of a lot. Same with maybe washing your car for you without your request. One partner might be totally blown away by that. They might think, wow, that's so sweet. They noticed my car was really dirty. They noticed I didn't have time to do it. I wasn't even thinking about it. This is so nice. Now I have a clean car. Someone else might be like, that's so annoying. I don't like when other people touch my stuff. I didn't ask them to do that. Why'd they do that? Right? What this tells us is that we all have different likes and dislikes in our relationships. What's a weed to one person might very well be a flower to another person. Some weeds are more commonly treated as such, and others are only considered weeds by a few people. Point being, it's complicated and it's personal, and of course, ultimately, it's your choice whether or not to pull weeds in the relationship. Cool. So, sorry, I think we're gonna. All right. We're going to skip to this one, I think, just for pre-recorded purposes. So in a healthy relationship, you and your partner can communicate openly about what's bothering you and what is going well in the relationship. It's important to not only talk about the problems in your relationship, but also the positives, so that no one feels like they're doing everything wrong, right? If you feel like you can't talk openly about important things like behaviors and dynamics that you don't like, then it probably isn't a healthy relationship. So having a hard conversation, right? This can absolutely be a part of a relationship, and it's definitely a part of pulling weeds if you decide that you want to do that. If you are doing this, entering the conversation with the resolution as the ultimate goal is a huge, huge, huge thing, right? We don't want to be fighting each other, putting each other down. We want to be coming into these things with, hey, I've got something that's bugging me. Let's see if we can solve this together. We want to create an environment that's welcoming and open and open to honest communication. We want to avoid crossing lines and attacking our partners, right? Verbally, emotionally, physically, etc. We want to keep the focus of the dispute on the issue at hand and avoid any personal kind of like jabs at the other person. If your partner consistently gets really heated, really aggressive, or starts cursing, then those are signs that the issue at hand is not something that can be resolved. Hard conversations, although challenging, should not be unsafe for either person. When talking about what's bothering you and things that you want to change in your relationship, maintaining a calm and respectful demeanor is super important. Typically, when you argue with your partner, it's because someone's needs are not being met. If it seems like your partner is sweating the small stuff, then maybe take a moment to evaluate whether there's a larger issue at hand for them. Is the topic that you're discussing, discussing or arguing about the problem, or is it something deeper? If you're upset that your partner isn't texting you back quickly enough, is it this need simply for the text to be sooner, or is there a more complex need for regular attention going on there? In these times, it is important to remember to be understanding of your partner instead of just trying to push your own point across. When having a conversation about adjusting dynamics, behaviors, or boundaries in a relationship, you want to make sure that you're communicating clearly so that your partner can best understand where you are coming from. These 4 principles of nonviolent communication are really, really helpful in doing that. If you haven't read or heard of the book Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg, I would highly recommend it. It's a really great book for kind of talking about this, right? Conflict, needs being met, different human beings interacting with each other. It's really great. One thing about nonviolent communication, though, is that both people do need to be on board, right? So again, this isn't a way to fix abusive relationships, right? Or to get out of an unsafe situation, because the only responsibility for fixing abuse or creating a less unsafe environment falls on the abuser. But again, nonviolent communication is a really, really great way to have these conversations, assuming that both people are on board, want to improve the relationship, and want to figure it out. So the first of these 4 steps is observe. When we're bringing up a conflict, when we're raising something that's bothering us, we want to observe a tangible behavior, right? We want to state a behavior that our partner is doing that is causing these feelings, this conflict, right? Hey, I noticed that yesterday you didn't put your dishes away. Whatever that might be. It's a non-disputable fact. You're not making a character judgment of them. You're not calling them lazy, stupid. You're not making any big extrapolations on their character or their personality from it. You're just stating something that you noticed. The next step is feel. So what are you actually feeling as a result of this situation? You might be feeling angry or sad or disappointed or stressed out or frustrated. Any of these things would constitute a reasonable feeling to be having in conflict. One trap that people often will fall into with the feel step is they might say something along the lines of, I feel like you don't care about me, right? I feel like our relationship means nothing to you. The difference between saying these kinds of statements and saying something like, hey, I'm feeling a lot of anger right now, or I'm feeling really sad. The difference between these two things is that those statements like, I feel like you don't care, those are actually accusations. Yes, they have the word feel in there, but really what you're saying when you're saying that is, you're a bad partner, you don't care about me, right? The word feel is just kind of in there to soften the blow. So when we're doing the feel step, we really want to discard all of that stuff and get down deep, dig deep within ourselves and just think, what am I actually feeling right now? With that text example, right? You aren't responding to my text very quickly. You're taking 6 hours to respond to me, and I'm feeling sad, right? Maybe like I would like to talk to you a little bit more and a little bit sooner. I'm feeling sad. I miss you. I miss talking more regularly, right? Those are reasonable feelings to be having. The third step we have is need. So again, whenever there is a conflict, really whenever human beings communicate with each other at all, it's to get needs met. That's what we're doing as human beings when we communicate with each other. So in conflict, what happens, as is very, very normal in life, is that two people's needs are clashing. And again, that's totally normal. That happens all the time. We're all different humans with different preferences, different experiences, backgrounds, and needs. So when these needs clash with each other, it's important to understand what need of mine is not getting met right now. Why am I feeling angry? Why am I feeling sad, right? And so with needs, there are going to be some that are more reasonable than others. Needs that are reasonable typically have to do with, again, those innate rights that we have in relationships of being treated with love, kindness, respect, gentleness, care, all of that, right? Needs that are less reasonable are actually demands, right? Those are unreasonable demands. Those might sound like, I need things to be done my way all the time. I need things, or I need you to listen to me no matter what. I need you to always do what I say. Those are not reasonable needs to have in an equal relationship. Those sound more like demands that maybe a parent might say to a young child or a teacher might say to a student, right? Those are not needs that we should be expressing in our equal relationships. So then finally, the last step is request. So this is where we clearly and directly state the thing that we would actually like changed. A couple of really important things with this one. We do want to make sure that we are specific in our request. So it might be tempting, again, if it's like a heated moment, if you're really stressed out, to say something vague in general, like, can you just, can you not be such a bad partner, right? That doesn't really constitute that request piece for a couple of reasons. One, it's not actually clear, right? That doesn't say what it is that they're doing that you would like changed. And secondly, it doesn't use positive action language. When we're doing requests, we want to make sure that we are framing things positively, giving our partner something to work toward rather than run away from. Hey, would you mind please doing this next time, right? Can you please do this instead of can you not do this? So these 4 steps are really vital, super helpful for transforming really kind of like rash and negative statements into very productive ones in conflict. So instead of saying something like, you're so lazy, you literally never do your dishes. It seems, I just feel like you don't care about me at all. You need to just not be such a slob and a bad partner next time, right? Instead of communicating something like that, we might go through these 4 steps. We might say, hey, I noticed that for the last week or so, you've been leaving your dishes out for me the next morning, right? I'm feeling pretty angry. And the reason for that is, I have a need that in a space that I live in, the work be divided equitably, right? Maybe if you really hate dishes, we can try to have a conversation about how you can take on a workload somewhere else so that our work is generally divided equally. Do you think that you could please do your dishes or, come up with a proposal and have a conversation with me about how we can divide this work more equally, right? Those are really expressing the same sentiments and doing so in very, very different ways. So pulling weeds. We want to be thinking about how we can do these things in healthy ways. right? So we're going to go through just a couple instead of do this, right? So instead of getting revenge by engaging in the same or similar unhealthy behaviors just to kind of show them how it feels, try this, talking to your partner about the behaviors that you see and why they concern you. See if your partner is doing it intentionally and if they're willing to change. If this person respects you, then they'll be interested in listening to what you have to say and change their unhealthy behavior. Here we go, the next one. Instead of making excuses for them to yourself or to others, like, well, they were just drunk or they're just stressed out, understand the importance of taking responsibility. Again, alcohol, drugs, and stress are reasons why why people may act differently, but they're never an excuse for unhealthy behaviors or for abuse. So just these couple examples, trying to think about how we can think about and go about pulling weeds healthfully. And I want to just leave you with this message, right? Some weeds are more stubborn than others. If you've ever had dandelions in your garden, you know that it can be almost impossible to get rid of them. Sometimes in relationships, the weeds are too overwhelming, and it might just be better to dig up the whole dang garden and start over, right? That was kind of a stretch, but essentially break up. If you try to pull weeds in your relationship and they still keep popping up, you don't have to stay in that relationship. You don't have to stay in that garden, right? It's okay to try to work on areas of an issue in a relationship. If that's how you want to spend your energy, that is totally fine. Some people love weeding. That's one of their things. They're like, when I'm stressed out, man, do I love to just get in the backyard and you dig up some weeds, right? That's totally fine. But it's also okay to end a relationship if you don't have the capacity to work through it, right? I am just not dealing with this garden. I would rather do a million other things than weed my backyard. Also super fair. Most importantly, weeds pop up in every single relationship. Just like a real garden, they're going to exist no matter how pristine the flower bed, no matter how much fancy fertilizer and landscaping services you use, they're going to be weeds, right? It's your call if and when you're ready to deal with them. So if you need extra support in your relationship, particularly with problematic behaviors, check out these resources. I will leave these up for a few seconds before I cut off this recording and let you all go about the rest of your day. Again, I guess I kind of figured that we would have a email slide at the end here, but I totally forgot that I didn't even put that in here. So I will just kind of read that out to you. If you have any questions for us or things that you'd like to talk further about, please feel free to email us at prevention@dvs-snowco.org. So again, that's just the word prevention, and then at dvs-snowco.org, just like right here. We would love to hear from you. And so, yeah, without further ado, I think I'll wrap this up. Thank you all so much for watching, for being here. We really appreciate it. And again, happy Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. Please spread the word, anything that you learned today. Tell your friends, tell your family. Really important that we get these words out. All right. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.